A visual observer is a trained crew member who assists the pilot in ensuring the safe conduct of a flight under visual line of sight. Welcome to the RPAS Visual Observer course, V01 1st Squadrone and AURA-pilot.ca. We hope you enjoy the course. CARS 901.11.1, subject to subsection 2, no pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft system, unless the pilot or a visual observer has the aircraft in visual line of sight at all times during flight. 2. A pilot may operate a remotely piloted aircraft system without the pilot or a visual observer having the aircraft in visual line of sight if the operation is conducted in accordance with a Special Flight Operations Certificate (RPAS) issued under Section 903.03. 901.19. 1. No person shall act as a crew member of a remotely piloted aircraft system if the person A. is suffering or is likely to suffer from fatigue, or B. is otherwise unfit to perform properly the person's duties. 2. No person shall act as a crew member of a remotely piloted aircraft system A. within 12 hours after consuming an alcoholic beverage, B. while under the influence of alcohol, or C. while using any drug that impairs the person's faculties to the extent that aviation safety or the safety of any person is endangered or likely to be endangered. 901.20. 1. No pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft system if visual observers are used to assist the pilot in the provision of detect and avoid functions unless reliable and timely communication is maintained between the pilot and each visual observer during the operation. 2. A visual observer shall communicate information to the pilot in a timely manner during the operation, whenever the visual observer detects conflicting air traffic, hazards to aviation safety or hazards to persons on the surface. 3. No visual observer shall perform visual observer duties for more than one remotely piloted aircraft at a time, unless the aircraft are operated in accordance with subsection 901.40. 1. or in accordance with a Special Flight Operations Certificate (RPAS) issued under Section 903.03. 4. No visual observer shall perform visual observer duties while operating a moving vehicle, vessel or aircraft. 901.21. Every crew member of a remotely piloted aircraft system shall, during flight time, comply with the instructions of the pilot. 901.23. 1. No pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft system unless the following procedures are established. Normal operating procedures, including pre-flight, takeoff, launch, approach, landing and recovery procedures, and B. Emergency procedures, including with respect to 1. A control station failure, 2. An equipment failure, 3. A failure of the remotely piloted aircraft, 4. A loss of the command and control link, 5. A flyaway, and 6. Flight termination. 2. If the manufacturer of the remotely piloted aircraft system provides instructions with respect to the topics referred to in paragraphs 1, A, and B, the procedures established under subsection 1 shall reflect those instructions. 3. No pilot shall conduct the takeoff or launch of a remotely piloted aircraft unless the procedures referred to in subsection 1 are reviewed before the flight by, and are immediately available to, each crew member. 4. No pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft system unless the operation is conducted in accordance with the procedures referred to in subsection 1. 901.26 subject to paragraph 901.69, 1, B, or C, no pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft at a distance of less than 100 feet, 30 meters, from another person, measured horizontally and at any altitude, except from a crew member or other person involved in the operation. 901.28 A pilot of a remotely piloted aircraft shall, before commencing a flight, ensure that there is a sufficient amount of fuel or energy for safe completion of the flight. B. Ensure that each crew member, before acting as a crew member, has been instructed with respect to the duties that the crew member is to perform, and E. On the location and use of any emergency equipment associated with the operation of the remotely piloted aircraft system, and C. Determine the maximum distance from the pilot the aircraft can travel without endangering aviation safety or the safety of any person. 901.30 No pilot shall conduct the takeoff or launch of a remotely piloted aircraft for which the manufacturer has provided a remotely piloted aircraft system operating manual unless the manual is immediately available to crew members at their duty stations. 901.34 No pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft system unless the weather conditions at the time of flight permit the operation to be conducted in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions, and B. The pilot of the system and any visual observer to conduct the entire flight within visual line of sight. 901.38 No pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft system using a first-person view device unless, at all times during flight, a visual observer performs the detect and avoid functions with respect to conflicting aircraft or other hazards beyond the field of view displayed on the device. 901.39 1. No pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft system during the night unless the remotely piloted aircraft is equipped with position lights sufficient to allow the aircraft to be visible to the pilot and any visual observer, whether with or without night vision goggles, and those lights are turned on. 2. No pilot shall operate a remotely piloted aircraft system using night vision goggles unless the goggles are capable of, or the person has another means of, detecting all light within the visual spectrum. Multiple remotely piloted aircraft. 901.40 1. No pilot shall operate more than one remotely piloted aircraft at a time unless the remotely piloted aircraft system is designed to permit the operation of multiple aircraft from a single control station and unless the aircraft are operated in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. 2. For the purposes of subsection 1, no pilot shall operate more than 5 remotely piloted aircraft at a time, except in accordance with a Special Flight Operations Certificate, RPAS issued under Section 903.03. Application for Special Flight Operations Certificate, RPAS 903.02. J. The names, certificates, licenses, permits and qualifications of the crew members, including the pilots and visual observers, and the remotely piloted aircraft system maintenance personnel.
While tests on bird strikes have been conducted for decades, what kind of damage a drone would cause was still virtually unknown until now. Researchers at the University of Dayton Research Institute are no strangers to airframe impact testing to determine what could happen to a general aviation aircraft if it hit a recreational drone in midair. This test was to see what would happen if an entire drone struck the leading edge of an airplane wing.
The drone did not shatter apart. It completely penetrated and it was buried inside the wing. You can see a hole in the leading edge here. The main spar is dented. There's several fasteners that are pulled from the spar from the wing skin. There's some stringers that are bent. There's also some tubing inside that was also bent. So there was a substantial amount of damage to the wing.
Is to understand the potential for hazardous impacts and to be more aware of the risks when they take to the sky.